What's going on, people? Today we're explaining Death Note Part 1 in just 13 minutes. To start things off, the season begins with Ryuk, who's a creature known as a Shinigami. These gods of death live in an empty wasteland called the Shinigami realm, where there's nothing to do except sleep, gamble, and occasionally kill humans. For context, every Shinigami has a Death Note, which is a book that can kill any human on Earth as long as you write the person's name while picturing their face in your mind. Because Ryuk was just bored, he purposely drops his Death Note into the human world, and 5 days later, he finds it in the hands of an absolute psycho. In Japan, Light Yagami is a high school student who happened to be watching when the book fell out the sky. After testing it a couple times, he understood the Death Note was real, and since then he went on a murderous rampage, killing criminals all over the world. Although the notebook does allow you to kill in different ways, nearly all of Light's victims specifically died from a heart attack. His reasoning was that he wants people to know the deaths are connected, because if people were aware that someone was judging them, then it'd force all of society to be on their best behaviour. For Ryuk, this was all pretty entertaining, and he stays close as Light goes to school during the day and then kills criminals in the evenings. Over time, the public suspects that someone is behind all of these heart attacks, and online they start referring to the culprit as Kira. This catches the attention of L, who's a detective famous for solving every case he's ever had, while never showing his face. With support from the ICPO, L appears on live TV for the first time, where he calls Kira evil and promises to catch him. In response, Light murders the innocent detective, but it turns out this was a trap. Firstly, the person Light killed wasn't the real L, and when the real L does appear, Light can't kill him since he never shows his face. Secondly, this live broadcast was only shown in the Kanto region of Japan, which is actually where Kira's first kill took place. By killing the fake L, Kira confirmed that he does live in this area, and by failing to kill the real L, he showed that his power has certain limitations. Feeling humiliated, Light vows to hunt down and kill the real L, just as L vowed to hunt down and execute Kira. Soon after, L starts working with the NPA, which is the Japanese police, and based on the timing of Kira's murders, he theorizes that the killer is a student. However, unknown to L, one of the officers he's working with is Soichiro Yagami, aka Kira's dad. When Soichiro gets home, Light hacks into his computer, discovering the police know Kira is in school. For that reason, he drastically changes his tactics and begins using the Death Note to schedule heart attacks in advance. This way, criminals die automatically throughout the day, even while he's at school, undermining L's theory that Kira is a student. By doing this, Light wanted to show L that he has access to police information to create a division between L and the NPA. Now, if Light had wanted to stay hidden, then this is the dumbest thing he could have done, because it turned the police and all of their families into suspects. However, we can't forget that Light's main goal is to kill L, and by creating division, he assumed that L would investigate the police and the police would investigate him back. Over time, this could lead to the NPA uncovering L's real identity, and this is nearly what happens. For context, after realizing that Kira had connections to the police, L hired 12 FBI agents to investigate each officer and their families. The agent sent to investigate Light was Ray Pember, who Light tricks into revealing his identity. A week later, Kira then eliminates Ray and the other FBI agents, forcing America to abandon their support for L. When the NPA found out about this, nearly all of their agents leave the case, since Kira had proven that he's willing to kill people like them. With only 5 team members remaining, including Light's dad, L decides that these remaining officers can be trusted, and secretly meets them in person. Now, following Ray Pember's death, his fiancée Naomi Masora starts an investigation of her own. As a former FBI agent, Naomi figures out that Kira has the power to kill in ways other than just heart attacks. Luckily for Light, he's able to intercept and get rid of her before she can reveal this to L, who's a person she's actually worked with before. Naomi's disappearance causes L to get suspicious, and in response, he believes Kira might be someone that her fiancé was following. That's why he narrows down the scope of his investigation and puts secret cameras inside the Yagami household. Almost immediately, Light realizes he's being watched, but he tries to turn the situation to his advantage. By hiding this small TV inside a bag of chips, he was able to kill criminals on the news while appearing to the cameras as if he was just studying. Normally, this would prove that Light can't be Kira, but his overly perfect behavior drew L's attention. Through observing these cameras, the detective realized that if Kira is Light, his ego has reached a level where he can kill without showing any emotion and without leaving any clues. Therefore, rather than waiting for a mistake, he wonders if by getting close to Kira, he can somehow get him to admit that he's the killer. Months later, when Light then goes to university, the detective approaches him and reveals that he is L. This was a genius move because from Light's point of view, if this is the real L, he can't kill him since it'd make it obvious to the other detectives that he's Kira. On top of that, L claimed that his real name was Hideki Ryuga, which is the name of a famous celebrity. If Light was to try and kill this Hideki, there's a chance he might accidentally think of the real one and kill him instead, which would also reveal that he's Kira. Frustrated, Light plays along as L tries to become his friend, but with each interaction, L's suspicion of him increases. Despite that, L invites Light to join the team hunting Kira because if he is Kira, it's possible he might make a mistake to try and cover his tracks, and if he's not Kira, his big brain would still be useful. Meanwhile, at a TV station called Sakura TV, they received audio tapes from someone claiming to be Kira. The person who sent these tapes was Misa Amane, who's another human that recently got a death note. Originally, Misa's notebook belonged to a Shinigami called Jealous, who for some reason watched her every single day from the Shinigami realm and was pretty much in love with her. On the day Misa was supposed to die, Jealous used his notebook to save her life, which is something a god of death should never do. As a result, Jealous died, and his notebook was picked up by another Shinigami called Rem. Personally, I think Rem was fascinated by the fact a Shinigami could love a human, and so to see what was so interesting about Misa, she went to the human world and gave her the death note. With this power, Misa pretended to be Kira in the tapes that were sent to Sakura TV. Why did she do this? Well, her aim was to meet the real Kira, and by appearing on TV, it was the best way to get his attention. After reviewing the tapes, Elle realizes pretty quickly this isn't the real Kira, as her methods were way different from the original. Her powers were also stronger than the first Kira, as she was seemingly able to kill just by seeing a face. Based on the tapes, Elle suspects that this new Kira might be willing to obey the original, and he gets Light to write a message pretending to be the real Kira. Light plays along partly because it would be suspicious if he didn't, and the message is broadcast on the news. After sending messages back and forth, Misa creates a code that would only be understood by a user of the Death Note. Through this code, she engineers a situation where she can find him, and a few days later, Misa then just shows up at his front door. Just like Elle predicted, her powers are stronger than Light's, given that she has the eyes of a Shinigami. These eyes allow her to know someone's name and lifespan just by seeing their face, but in exchange, she had to sacrifice half her life. Previously, Light refused to make this deal with Ryuk, but Misa made the deal with Rem since she was that desperate to meet Kira. Her obsession came from the fact that Kira got revenge against the man who killed her parents, and when she saw what he looked like, she instantly fell in love with him. That's why, in exchange for becoming his girlfriend, Misa offered to use her eyes in any way he wanted. However, less than a week later, she was arrested by Elle on suspicion of being the second Kira. The reason for this is that Elle was having Light followed, and when Misa was seen with him, they investigated her room. There, they found physical evidence, directly linking her to the second Kira's audio tapes. For 3 days, she was then tortured by Watari, but refused to give away any details. In the end, Rem convinces Misa to give up ownership of her Death Note, allowing her to forget all memories related to the book. The Shinigami then promises to kill Light if he doesn't save Misa, even if it means dying like Jealous did. In response, Light formulates a plan to kill Rem and Elle, while at the same time proving that he's not Kira. To understand this plan, we first have to know that when a Death Note is owned by a human, that human becomes possessed by the last Shinigami to have the notebook. This is why Ryuk follows Light and why Rem followed Misa, because they were the last two Shinigami to have those specific Death Notes. With that said, Light's plan begins when he goes into the forest with 2 notebooks. Due to Misa giving up ownership of the second notebook, it now technically belonged to Light, which is why in this scene he gives up ownership. Under Light's instructions, the notebook was then transferred to Rem, who then transferred it to Ryuk. This meant that Misa's original notebook is now attached to Ryuk, and from now on, anyone who owns it will be possessed by him. Ryuk then gives this notebook to Light, making him the new owner again, and this was done so that Ryuk and Light would still be connected no matter what happens to his first notebook. Speaking of the first notebook, Light convinced Ryuk to write some fake rules inside of it, which will be very important later on. With the fake rules inside, Light then transferred ownership of this notebook to Rem and told her to give it to someone with status who would use it for their own personal gain. Light knew that a person like this would be willing to kill, and if the killings happened while he and Misa were locked up, that would prove their innocence. This is why Light offered to be confined, and after 2 weeks in jail, criminals began dying once again. Rem had given the first Death Note to a businessman called Higuchi, under the agreement that he sometimes acts like Kira. The return of Kira took a lot of suspicion away from Light, and to make him look even more innocent, in jail he'd given up ownership of the second Death Note. This meant that just like Misa, his memories of the Death Note were gone, allowing them to act genuine when put to the test. After 50 days in confinement, the two Kiras were then released, but L still had them under 24/7 surveillance. Having failed to prove their guilt, the detective got depression, but without his memories, Light motivated L to investigate the third killer. Eventually, after a lot of snooping around, the team does then catch Higuchi, who fully admits that he kills using a supernatural notebook. With the revelation that Shinigami and Death Notes are real, L realizes that there must be at least 2 books based on the code written by the second Kira. Meanwhile, Light regains all his memories by touching the notebook, and after subtly killing Higuchi, ownership transfers back to him. From the start, he'd always planned for this to happen because he had faith that his good side would want to catch the third Kira. When the team examines Light's original Death Note, they discover Ryuk's fake rule, which says that a Death Note user must kill at least once every 13 days. If this was true, it would have proved that Light and Misa couldn't be Kira, given that they were locked up for 50 plus days without access to anything. Rem even backs them up by saying all notebooks have the same rules, convincing everyone except L that Light and Misa never had a Death Note. Now, when it comes to Misa, under Light's instruction, she begins killing criminals again, using her original Death Note that he buried in the forest. As we know, Light swapped ownership of this notebook from Rem to Ryuk, meaning that Misa was now possessed by him. This was important because having lost her Shinigami eyes, Light knew that Misa would be willing to make the deal again. Obviously, Rem would have never agreed to that, but Ryuk didn't really care, and he gladly cut her lifespan in half for a second time. Following that, she wrote the names of criminals, and with the murders happening so soon after she was released from surveillance, Misa becomes the #1 suspect. To finally prove that she's guilty, L begins making plans to test the 13-day rule, and if the rule was shown to be fake, Misa would likely be executed. In this way, Light created a situation where Misa is the prime suspect, and L is now a threat to her life, meaning that if Rem was to kill him, she'd also die in the same way as Jealous. This had always been Light's plan to get rid of Rem because she cared about Misa too much to let her be executed. On top of that, Light also knew that Rem couldn't kill him because at this point, if he died, Misa would no longer have the will to live. That's why, from Rem's perspective, killing L was the only thing she could do, as it would save Misa from death while also extending her lifespan, given that when a Shinigami sacrifices themselves to save a human, that human gains their remaining years. Therefore, to save Misa from being executed, Rem used her Death Note to kill Wataru and L, the only people who were willing to test the 13-day rule. In the process, Rem died as well, and her Death Note was quickly scooped up by Light before anyone noticed. With all of his enemies dead, Light then feels free to go on a major killing spree over the next 5 years, as he creates a new society where Kira's judgment was now accepted by several nations. Additionally, to prevent any international panic, L's death was kept a secret, with Light replacing him as the new L. Only people in the NPA were aware of this switch, but unknown to Light, news of L's death had been sent to the orphanage where L grew up. With that said, that was Death Note Part 1 in 13 minutes, and if you liked it, please comment and drop a like, and let me know in the comments what you think I should recap next, preferably under 25 episodes. Also, I'm trying to reach 500k subs by the end of the year, so if you're not subscribed, I'd appreciate if you hit that button. Until the next one, peace out.